In the building on this Tuesday, this beautiful Tuesday down here in the South. Make sure you're commenting below if you're watching in the archives. Archive views are really good. Thanks to the new subscribers to the channel, and thanks to the new followers over on Twitter as well. And as always, like, subscribe if you're watching this on archives, which 90% of you will be. And if you're watching live, leave that comment. And I left the poll there. Who do you have winning this fight this weekend? Fulton, or do you got Roman? Who you got winning? So that's the poll today. Make sure to leave your answer there and leave a comment as to how you feel this fight's going to play out. Shout out to OJ22 in the building. Always appreciate the support, man. I love this fight weekend. Love this fight weekend. It's got something for casuals. It's got something for us hardcore boxing fans, but in particular, this is a hardcore boxing fan weekend. Love it. No cap. And I was thinking back, like, we're on a great run of boxing right now. Great run. And I tweeted this out yesterday. It's like we're being spoiled as boxing fans right now, which is weird. It's a weird feeling. You know, I'm so used to complaining about why this fight can't get made. This fight can't get made. And as always, like, the fights that I want to get made don't always get made. But even in those cases right now, it feels like it's a good consolation prize. Like if you look at Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, that's not the fight I wanted to see. I wanted to see Ryan Garcia versus Jojo Diaz instead of Ryan Garcia versus the guy Jojo Diaz just beat. However, it's a good consolation prize. It's a good fight. It's a good scrap, and it's an LA fight. They put it where it belongs. It's nice. It's nice. Shout out JC in the building. So just right now, it's fight weekend after fight weekend after fight weekend. And on top of that, you've got news being made of sanctioning bodies ordering fights. You know, they're keeping things active. And then you've got fights getting made in July, going into August and September. So it's just a beautiful time to be alive. You're a boxing fan. Beautiful. I saw that the fight was ordered between Mel and Zoo earlier, which I love. And Mel's got 20 days to decide if he wants to fight that fight at 154 or move up to 160. So it's good to see these sanctioning bodies putting a little pressure, right? He's got 120 days to fight the Tim Tszyu fight from when he fought Castaño. So we'll see what he does. I think 154 Charlo is going to become 160 Charlo. 160 Charlo is going to become 168 Charlo. I can't really blame Mel for not wanting to stay at 154 because he's given me what I wanted as a boxing fan up to this point. I'd love to see him stick around at 154 and fight Tszyu, fight Fundora. But I can't really blame him. He's already cleaned out the division against the belt holders. He's fought top competition throughout the past 4 or 5 years, unlike his brother at 160. And I have full faith in him that if he moves up to 160, he'll be the opposite of what Maul's been at 160. I think Mel's going to be a different beast at 160 than Maul. I have faith that Mel, and I think Al Heyman has more faith in Mel than Maul, that he'll possibly fight a Munguia. He'll possibly fight a Janabek down the line. But that's a division that's heating up. You got Mel moving up, Janabek, you got Munguia, and then you've got Fundora possibly moving up right behind Mel. So either way, I think that Mel and Fundora are going to meet down the line, and I think it's going to be at 160. And what a fun fight that's going to be. Shout out OJ22. Definitely appreciate this super sticker. George versus Devin Prediction. I'm taking George by close, controversial decision. This one's tough for me. It's tough for me. I don't really get a good handle on it. The other fights this weekend, I have a good handle on. I think Ogawa's going to win. Against the guy from the UK who is undefeated. I actually think that Inoue is going to stop Donaire in that fight next Tuesday and unify at 120 or 118. And then I'm going to talk about this. I'm not going to give my official prediction yet, but I think Fulton against Roman is going to play out a lot in my opinion, like Fulton versus Figueroa, and then in that you have two guys with low KO percentages here who are smart fighters and active fighters. And I think it's going to come down to a close decision in that fight once again. And I think Roman is undervalued at my plus 400, plus 450 where he's at right now. I think he's undervalued. He's going to give Fulton a tough fight. More on that in a minute. But as far as Cambosos versus Haney, I don't really have a good feel on it. Like, I could see it playing out either way. I think it's going to go down to a decision. And if you think it's going to go down to a decision, how could you bet money against Cambosos, who we've seen how things go down in Australia, right? We saw it with Pacquiao versus Horn, the most recent example. It's a tough place to fight. You're going in there without your two top trainers. Not only that, if you win, you've got to do it again, back to back, out in the land of the kangaroo. So I'll just say this starting off, and I'm going to give my official prediction on that later on in the week. I'll have plenty to talk about with Cambosos versus Haney, believe me. I'll be talking about that a lot this week. But here's what I'll say off the jump today. I have full respect for Cambosos because a lot of guys, he went in last year, took Teofimo's belts in Teofimo's homeland, then goes back to his homeland and could have took some easy touches off the bat, took an easier fight, then took another easier fight possibly, and then started talking about the Lomachenkos of the Haneys of the world. But instead, what he does is takes those belts, tries to get the Lomachenko fight. Obviously, the situation in Ukraine blocked that. But then after that falls through, he goes straight to the undisputed fight with Haney. The balls on this guy, right? The balls on this guy. He's got balls. He's got balls. He is interested in fighting legacy fights. Full respect. And then with Devin Haney, full respect. Devin Haney's coming off, when compared to his peers in the division, a good 2021 where he beat Jorge Linares and then beat Jojo Diaz, who was in the top 10. Okay, so he did that and then followed that up by saying, I want to go over to the land of the kangaroo and fight for all the belts. Put my strap on the line with his straps and let's fight for undisputed. On top of that, if I were to beat him, I'll agree to go over there again and defend my belts, all of them, against the guy I just beat in his homeland. Again, I like how Devin Haney's conducting himself right now. Devin Haney's making a bet on himself early in the career. So if Devin Haney gets past this, let's say he gets past this 2 to 3 fight contract, undefeated, undisputed, he's all of a sudden looking at himself as a 24-year-old, undisputed promotional free agent. Whew. Think of the leverage that comes with that. I like how he's conducting himself. He's conducting himself like Cambosos, the two of them. Like they're built. I have the sense that they're getting tired of each other. They're annoyed with each other, but they're built the same. Different parts of the world, different cultures, different backgrounds, but they're built from the same cloth. They both want the same thing. They both view things the same way, is let's fight some legacy fights. Let's build up our legacy while we make money. Let's make this thing look like a sport, not just a business. I love that about these two fighters. I've become a fan of both of them. It's going to be tough for me to watch this weekend because I don't want there to be a loser. I want both guys to win, and that's impossible, obviously. So it's going to be a tough watch for me. But at the same time, it's going to be fun because I know the action I'm getting, and I know that whoever wins this fight, the undisputed championship is in possession of a guy who we wanted to be in the possession of as boxing fans, as guys who strictly want to watch the best. Because I saw Devin Haney say it on Boxing Scene earlier today, is 130, after this, 135 is coming through me, and the best are going to have to fight the best because that's what I want. He said something to that effect. So how can you not like that guy? How could you not like that guy? So Haney versus Cambosos, on top of everything else we're getting this weekend. I love it. The environment is going to be great there. It's going to be a tough environment for Devin Haney. all the marbles. He's going out there without his two best trainers. He's going out there, presumably, with three judges who will likely be giving the benefit of the doubt to Cambosos if recent history tells us anything. So he's got the deck stacked up against him, and he said, so what? Let's do it. So what? Let's do it. And on top of that, if I win, let's do it again. How can you not like that guy? How can you not like him? I agree both Charlos need to move up, and I think they will. 160 Charlo Maul is going to be heading up to 168 to chase the Ginger King. And then Mel, I think Mel sees the writing on the wall that I've already done what I've done at 154. I don't need to prove anything else. And then you got some young lions chomping at my heels. So let's move up to 160 and test the waters there. And if you move up to 160, let's see if he does this or not. I hope not. I hope he continues to keep this run going of tough fights. But he could take, it gives him an excuse to take an easier fight or two moving up a division, right? I got Fulton winning a 12-round fight against Roman. Fulton's a better, more versatile, rangier, better in-and-out fighter and superior hand speed. Salute to you, Calix, and salute to Javier Martinez. And it's a good preview right there. The cards are definitely stacked against Haney. There is no doubt about that. I got Cambosos, W12. Haney, Cambosos is a better in-fighter, better stamina, especially in the last rounds. Cambosos is a better counterpuncher and can fight off the front and back foot with equal effect. The interesting thing about this fight is, and like I said, later in the week, we're going to be talking a lot about this, is both guys have shown some vulnerabilities, right? And that's why I like them too. I like vulnerable fighters. Is Haney showed it against Linares. He never fully recovered from that shot Linares landed against him late in that fight. So you say, okay, what if in his prime 135-pounder who can punch lands a shot on like that against him? The thing about Cambosos, if you look at his punching power percentage, KO percentage is not that high. But you saw against Teofimo that he can hit. He can hit. He can punch. So we'll see what he can do if he can test Haney's chin. On the other end of that, Teofimo landed big shots against Cambosos, and Cambosos was hurt a couple of times. The thing about that in this fight is Haney, I don't think, is going to test Cambosos' chin because Haney's not a big puncher. The thing with Haney is, will he be able to establish that jab and sustain it throughout 12 rounds to keep Cambosos at bay? Will he win the real estate battle? Will he keep Cambosos where he wants him in the ring? That's the big question in this fight. It's going to be a real estate battle. I got Cambo. Cambo might sleep Haney. We'll see. My bet is on the over for right now, but I'm going to continue to study this fight and see. It's just tough to get a handle on this fight. It really is for me. And it's close to toss-up odds. Haney is a slight favorite in this fight, but it's close to toss-up. And the fact that Haney is the slight favorite in this fight, given all the things that I mentioned, the judges, him going across the world, him going there without his two top trainers. They're pricing all that in. So they're saying if Haney is minus 180 right now, all things being even, neutral territory with his trainers, they're probably saying Haney is minus 300 against Cambosos. So they think, Vegas thinks that Haney's the better fighter than Cambosos. We'll see, but because they thought that about Teofimo going in against Cambosos, and Teofimo was a big favorite against Cambosos. Haney definitely gets my props for the balls and daring to be great. That's right. We like fighters who dare to be great here. Cambosos has a nasty overhand right and a sneaky inside left hook. He's great at judging distance. Haney has too many defensive and mental lapses on the inside, and in the late rounds, he also gasses in the last third of the fight. And let's see what the poll's at right now. The poll has Fulton 60%, Roman 40%. Let's get into that fight. If you look at the landscape at 122, implications. I love fights with implications. When you look at Fulton versus Roman, it's a top 5 fight in the weight class. So no matter what happens in this fight, the landscape is going to change. And I love fights like that. I'm not in fights like what we saw last weekend, Tank versus a guy outside the top 20, there's no implications there unless there's a big upset. So to me, it's a throwaway fight. It's a no value fight. But for this one, there's implications. There was demand for it from the boxing public, entertainment value, as I'll go into in a minute, and then you've got implications. If you look at the top, let's just throw out the top 5. MJ Akhmadaliev. And I love Akhmadaliev. If you have never watched Akhmadaliev fight at 122, do yourself, go down a rabbit hole, go down a deep dive. He's only 10-0 with 7 knockouts, but the guy can fight, and he's powerful. And he may be, low-key, the best guy in the division, including Fulton. And I think that MJ Akhmadaliev and Stephen Fulton are on a collision course at 122. That's what I think. The only thing that can upset that is if there's an upset on the fight this weekend. Roman, who is a live dog, who has value at plus 450 in my opinion. And then Ronnie Rios fights Akhmadaliev later on in the month. I love this because it sets up a semifinals here. You've got a guy in Fulton with 2 belts. Then you got a guy in Akhmadaliev with the other 2 belts. So whoever wins this fight sets themselves up nicely for an Akhmadaliev fight for undisputed at 122 later on in the year or early next year. Love it. That's the implications I talk about. On top of that, you have pound for pound implications because Stephen Fulton is right there on the cusp of top 10 pound for pound. He's right on the outside of it, according to most people. Some people have him on the bottom end already. I have him right on the outside because I think too many guys have been making a claim for top 10 pound for pound on the bottom end of that top 10 pound for pound recently. A lot of guys have been making a claim. Mel made a claim. Shakur Stevens said, other guys as well. So you have guys making claims there. Stephen Fulton, as far as top 10 pound for pound, I think he has to win this fight, but I think he has to win it decisively this time instead of like a debatable decision like he had against Figueroa. And that was a good win. And this would be a very good win if he were to win it. And that's 2 back-to-back top 5 wins because right now Figueroa is number 3 and Roman is number 4. And then let's say he wins those 2 fights and then fights Akhmadaliev for all the marbles at 122 later this year, early next year. He would have had beaten the other 3 guys in the top 4 on his way to winning all the belts at 122. And at that point, you have to start considering this guy top 5 pound for pound if you were able to pull that off. Top 5, top 6, top 7, somewhere in there. But if he wins this fight, you have to start considering him top 10 pound for pound because he's starting to put together a phenomenal resume on top of the eye test popping off when it comes to Stephen Fulton because he's a guy who's a boxer. He's a versatile fighter. He can fight with high output. He can fight against fighters who do have high output. He showed that against Figueroa. Figueroa threw over 1,000 punches in that fight. If we want to start talking about CompuBox, Figueroa threw over 1,000 punches. So how did Fulton stay in that fight and how did Fulton pull it out in the cards? Fulton pulled it out in the cards without having big punching power. Because you say, against a guy like Figueroa, if you'd have said coming in, Figueroa throws over 1,000 punches against Stephen Fulton, you would have said, I think Figueroa probably wins that fight against a guy who doesn't have a high KO percentage and can't keep him honest. However, how did Fulton stay in that fight? He landed a higher percentage. And not only that, he threw with high output as well. He threw over 700 punches in that fight. He was averaging over 60 punches per round. So Fulton, to me, is a versatile fighter who can fight many different ways. He can fight against many different styles. And that's why when you look at the landscape at 122 and you say, if undisputed does happen by next year, who would be the undisputed champion? I think Fulton would be the guy with the highest odds to pull that off, right? If you look at Roman, what's impressive to me about Roman is against the fight against Akhmadaliev 2 years ago, and I think he's won two straight since then, maybe 3, but I think 2. And by the way, that's his only loss on his resume in the past decade. His other 2 losses are early in his career. So Roman is impressive. Roman can fight. And Roman can fight high output as well. And my proof of that is if you look at the CompuBox stats for the Akhmadaliev fight, Akhmadaliev can punch. And he lands a high percentage of his power punches. That guy can punch. And what happened in that fight? Roman still threw over 60 punches per round. So you say against a big puncher like that, if you're throwing over 60 punches per round, and I know that that's not extremely high for the weight, but it's still pretty high against a power puncher who's throwing a lot of punches himself. So that tells me that Roman has a hell of a chin, one. And number two, he's gonna find a way to set up his punches, whether it be against a big puncher or against a guy like Fulton who will give you angles, right? Will fight on the outside and the inside, give you angles. And I think that Roman is still going to be able to set up his shots and will stay active in the fight. Even if he's missing, even if he's not landing a high percentage, he's still going to be going after Fulton. He's still going to be active. He's still going to be throwing a lot of punches, which is going to look good to the judges. It's going to look good to the judge. Even if you're hitting arms, it's still going to look good. So I think this fight plays out a lot like Fulton versus Figueroa, where Roman becomes a pressure fighter. He's throwing at a high output. And then Fulton is going to have to throw higher than he's probably comfortable with. Throw 60 to 70 punches per round like he did against Figueroa. Throw 700-something punches in a 12-round fight. And throw it at a higher percentage than Roman did. And then it comes down to, how are the judges perceiving this fight? What do the judges favor? Do they judge the guy trying to make the fight? Do they judge it for the guy who's throwing at a higher output? Do they judge it for the guy who's making his punches count? Which one? And it becomes a close fight. And that's why I say, like, if you're leaning Roman here, there's value in Roman plus 450. I think that's a little wide. Akhmadaliev was a beast, man, and Roman was right there with him. And that's his only blemish in the past 10 years. I know Fulton's special. I know it. But I think the odds are a little wide. Free Smoke, MJ, Ahmed, the goods. He is the goods. He is. And the top of that division is fun. And I think we're going to get an answer as to who is the champion by next year. These guys are mixing it up at the top, much like at 118, Inoue versus Donaire. I think they're going to consolidate 3 of the belts, and hopefully we have undisputed there by next year as well. Roman was also a former 2-belt champion. That's right. Roman's a fighter, man. He's a fighter. He showed that to me against Akhmadaliev. And I'm telling you, people are sleeping, even the boxing world. If you mention Akhmadaliev, a lot of them aren't going to know what you're talking about, because a lot of them don't follow boxing underneath 130. And he's a guy from across the world, although he resides in the States. So they're just not going to know who he is. But I'm telling you, the guy can fight. The guy can fight. And implications with him, too, because if he beats Ronnie Rios and he watches these two guys, after watching these two guys beat up on each other, and then he's a guy with punching power, and then he's going to face a guy with a low KO percentage for undisputed, he's got a shot at possibly being a year away from pound for pound top 10 talk as well. Even only 10 fights into his career. The guy can fight. Where is Inoue on my pound for pound list? I got him in the top 4. Somewhere in the top 4. It's tough for me. Pound for pound is tough for me since Canelo lost, because Canelo losing creates a vacuum, right? And that's why I say, like, all these other guys are Memphis Bleak territory to me. They're all one hit away. So that's why I say, starting this weekend, you're going to start to get a better feel on who is possibly number 1 pound for pound since Canelo's loss. I just thought Canelo was lapping these guys off of activity and accomplishment, being that he consolidated all the belts at 168 and became the undisputed champion at 168. So accomplishment and activity, Canelo was lapping these guys, but all of a sudden he loses, and then there's a vacuum that's created that these other guys weren't active enough to fill, in my opinion. So right now, my official position is there is no pound for pound champion, but Inoue is going to be the first in line to try to make a claim for that, right? If he were to beat Donaire by knockout, like by brutal knockout, then suddenly he has a claim. If Usyk beats Joshua again and does it even more fantastic, suddenly he has a claim. He's not a career heavyweight, remember that. So a lot of people are going to have him in their pound for pound rankings. And some even put career heavyweights in their pound for pound rankings. But ultimately, if Crawford versus Spence is made before the end of the year, whoever wins that fight is going to be universally recognized as a pound-for-pound champ, in my opinion. Even if Canelo came back and beat Golovkin in September and did it clearly, I still think the winner of Crawford versus Spence will likely be the pound-for-pound king by the end of the year. But as far as Inoue, he's somewhere in the top 5 of the guys I just mentioned, because I mentioned who is it? Crawford, Spence, Usyk, Inoue, and Canelo. So that's my top 5 still. And Inoue fits anywhere you want to put him in there. I mean, I'd say somewhere smack dab in the middle, possibly 3. But he's there. He had a slower 2021. At least he stayed active with 2 fights, but he had a slower 2021. So it's tough to say. Whereas Jermell is definitely on my pound-for-pound list. I would have him somewhere in the 6 to 8 range. Jermell, undisputed. 6 to 8, possibly even higher, right? Maybe 5. Maybe, I'd probably have him over Errol. So I'd probably have Jermell at number 5. But I got to sit down and really pound down a top 10 pound for pound, because I feel like I'm one of those dudes that I used to criticize, because I feel like I have 25 guys in my top 10 right now. And that's how hot boxing is right now. Guys are starting to get active. Guys are putting on great performance after great performance each weekend. So it's tough to, once you get to the bottom of the top 10, it's getting real tough. And that's why I brought up Stephen Fulton here is I don't think it's just about winning now. I think it's about winning and putting on a great performance to get into that top 10 pound for pound, especially when you're getting fights made like Gallo Estrada versus Chocolatito 3. It looks like it's going to happen. And the winner of that fight is definitely a top 10 pound for pound guy. Some people even have both of them in there. I've always been high on Chocolatito. I thought he won both Estrada fights. I know some people disagree with me on the second fight. And some people even had Estrada winning the first fight. That fight was close too. So I just feel like I'm throwing out a lot of names for top 10 pound for pound, and it's getting to where my list is at like 25 at this point. So, but Stephen Fulton's going to have implications this weekend too, because just getting back to that fight. And shout out to Nando in the building. Roman looked really good in his last fight. Got some chocolatito to him. Yeah, and that's what I was bringing up. Like, how pathetic was Tank's celebration after beating that third-rate fighter? Pound for pound is vacant, in my opinion, right now. I would agree with that. Why do you think these fighters today become so inactive? I got my theories on that. It's just making too much money to fight average opposition. So it creates an environment where they only have to fight once a year against average opposition. It's not much deeper than that. But I want to get back to Fulton versus Roman real quick and why I love this fight, and really nail down why I love this fight. The landscape of this division is going to change after this fight. Whether you have Fulton or Akhmadaliev number 1, I've seen some people have Akhmadaliev number 1. I've seen some people have Fulton number 1. I think those guys are on a collision course. I think that Akhmadaliev is going to beat Ronnie Rios later this month. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, even in the boxing public, don't know who MJ Akhmadaliev is. If you don't, like I said, go down that rabbit hole on YouTube and watch the guy fight, because he is a fighter. Punching power. He's one of the guys in the top of the division who has punching power. Figueroa is an activity fighter. Fulton, a great boxer, but not much punching power. And the same thing with Roman. Activity fighter, pressure fight, can be a pressure fighter, has layers to his game, but not a big KO guy either. So the interesting thing that, as far as this division goes, is if Akhmadaliev and Fulton are on this collision course, let's say they both win their fights, let's say neither one of them gets upset this month in June, you set up the undisputed fight at that point. You should anyway, for later this year, early next year. You set up that fight. And that sets up puncher versus boxer for all the marbles at 122. And whoever wins that fight is definitely in the top 10 pound for pound at that point. But it sets up your classic boxer versus puncher in Fulton versus Akhmadaliev. And I'm telling you, Akhmadaliev is not a guy to look past. So if you're now saying, oh, Fulton's clearly the guy at 122, I'm telling you, don't look past that guy that you probably never heard of. But he's a hell of a fighter. He's just flying under the radar. But he's dangerous. But Roman is dangerous too. I keep saying this. I think he's undervalued at plus 450 against Fulton. I think this fight's going to play out a lot like Fulton versus Figueroa, in that Roman is going to be active. He's going to maybe not as active as Figueroa, but I just keep going back to this stat. He threw over 60 punches per round against Akhmadaliev. And yes, Akhmadaliev is more stationary than Fulton will be, but Akhmadaliev can punch. And Roman was taking those punches and still active. Still active. I think he's going to be able to set up his shots against Fulton like Figueroa was as well. I think he'll have success with his activity. I think he's going to have a lower percentage, much lower percentage than Fulton. But it's going to come down to whether the judges favor the guy trying to make the fight, coming forward, throwing more punches, or the guy who is making the punches count, landing at a higher percentage, and giving you better boxing ability overall. And I think that guy's going to be Fulton. I think Fulton ultimately, in official prediction coming later this week, but I think ultimately, I keep going back to it. I think Fulton versus Akhmadaliev is a collision course fight. I think it's going to happen. I think the boxing gods have already spoken that it's going to happen. But I wouldn't put it past Roman to upset the apple cart. Ronnie Rios won't, I don't believe, against Akhmadaliev, but I give Roman a better shot than Vegas is giving him to win this fight. I think it's a tough fight for Fulton. I think it's a tough fight. Another thing to look at, and the prop bets haven't come up yet, but the 10.5, I think it's going to be a over under 10.5 fight. And Vegas does that where if they have a really good feel that this is going to decision, they just price the over under at 10.5. And they give you better odds for betting the under. I think the over is almost a sure thing here. I think this is going to go over. So I want to see how they price the over in this fight before I give my betting advice on how you should bet this fight, because I want to see where the line is for the over on this fight. If it's anywhere to close odds, I'm betting the over, much like I did Tank versus Rolly last week. I bet the under. The under was close to even odds at 6.5 rounds. I jumped on it. I think there was value there. So I think this one goes decision, and I think it's going to come down to what the judges value more. Activity, trying to make the fight, or better boxing ability and higher percentage of punches landed. Jamel should have a hand on the throne, better resume than Bud, in my humble opinion. And that's the thing too, like Jamel, I have to put him in my top 5. I have him above Errol. And I mean, I can't really I can't really argue with this. Like, I can't really argue with this. He's got a better resume than Bud. I think you have to price in the fact that Bud has been avoided, but also Bud re-signed with Top Rank. So a lot of that is his fault as well. So just a lot. When you start talking pound for pound, it gets very subjective and it's tough, but I've shown Jamel respect over the years, much more than a lot of other people. What he's done at 154, the run he's gone on the past 4 or 5 years is impressive. So whether he stays at 154 and defends his belts against Tim Tszyu, or he moves up to 160, he can't do any wrong to me right now. He's earned that. He's earned that, like to get no criticism from the boxing fans, in my opinion. If he moves up to 160, good enough. Good enough. He's done enough at 154 to me. But if he stays at 154 and fights Tim Tszyu, woo, what a fight. What a fight. And Sebastian Fundora still there. And I think that's another collision course fight. I think Mel and Sebastian Fundora are eventually going to have it out. And I think it's going to be at 160. Because Fundora seems to be busting at the seams as well. Jamel above but under. Why is Jamel above but under in a way. That's what I'm saying. Like it gets subjective, man. If you have Jamel above Inoue, I don't really argue with that. But I think Inoue is fighting meaningful fights at the weight too. 2021, not as much, but he's fighting many meaningful fights in the division as well. He's 2 fights away from undisputed himself. After this weekend, it'll be 1 fight from undisputed. And then he just passes the eye test with flying colors. It's not often you get everything consolidated into a lighter weight class fighter like that. He's going to give you the boxing ability. He's going to give you the activity of a lower weight class fighter. And on top of that, he's going to give you the high percentage power punching that an upper weight class fighter will give you. He's knocking guys out like upper weight class fighters knock guys out in a way. So that's why he's high on a lot of people's pound for pound list, myself included. So, but like I said, 1 through 10 right now is more volatile than any time I can think of. It's just volatile at the top and the bottom. It's just volatile. So many guys are making claims right now. I think it's an interesting dichotomy is like, I think the reason the top is volatile is the top guys aren't really making claims for that top spot. It was Canelo. He was lapping the other guys. The other guys haven't filled that vacuum. They're 1 fight away, like Memphis Bleek's 1 hit away. So they're going to be able to make their claim. But then the bottom of the top 10 is the opposite. So many guys are making claims now to be 6 through 10 in their weight class. Cambosos Haney this weekend is going to be another one. It's going to be another one. Like one of those guys is going to make a claim, a clear claim for 6 through 8, somewhere between that. So you have so many guys. You have like 10, 15 guys that I feel that you can put in that bottom 5 of the top 10 pound for pound. It's just tough, man. It's volatile. Shout out Chauncey Pearls, man. I appreciate this as always. Pros and cons of AJ choosing Robert as a trainer. And that's the other point I wanted to get to before I wrap this up. I saw that AJ chose Robert Garcia, and my first thought of it, quite honestly, was I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. I've always been the guy that said of that mindset that once a guy gets to a certain point in his career, he is who he is. It's sort of that, can you teach an old dog new tricks, or is it a detriment to try to teach him new tricks? Will there be too much in his head going into the fight? He's already got to deal with the master boxer in Usyk, but then he's got to try to learn a new style. He's got to learn the chemistry of fighter versus trainer. Generally, when a guy changes a trainer, you want to see him in a tune-up fight, maybe 2 tune-up fights. There's no tune-up here. You're going in there against a guy who just schooled you, and then you're going in there against him again, and he's arguably top 2, top 3 pound for pound guy in the sport. And you got to learn this new system. You got to learn the chemistry of your trainer in this short period of time. It's not just giving. Robert Garcia is going to give. Robert Garcia is a great mind. He's going to give AJ a great game plan. He's going to give him a game plan that's going to make him the most productive, I believe. However, can AJ execute that game plan is the big thing to me. Obviously, he wants a more American style, a more aggressive, offensive-minded style. That's what he said. He said that himself. He wanted to go shop for American trainers. He wanted to find somebody who's going to bring that dog out of him. So I think Robert Garcia is going to try to bring that dog out of him in the training camp, bring him sparring partners that are going to test him. So that's maybe that's the mindset maybe it's just a mindset for Anthony Joshua thing. It's just a mindset thing. I need him to bring the dog out of me. It's not about a game plan. It's not about what stylistically I need to do against Usyk. It's about I need him to bring this monster out of me that I know is inside of me so I can knock this guy out in this fight. I have no interest in going 12 rounds. I have no interest in outboxing him. I want to knock him out. So possibly that's what this is. Chauncey, facts. AJ going to get that Latino support now, more global star. And maybe that's what it is too. Maybe he's going for a crossover appeal. I think Robert will have him use AJ's own attributes, his size, and his power. Yeah, much like with Emmanuel Stewart and Klitschko. And that's one instance in where it worked, right? He had him use his size. He had him get cagey, more clever fighter, more boxing IQ. Anytime Emmanuel Stewart's big thing was control the distance with Klitschko. He realized that Klitschko had no chin. He couldn't take punches. So anytime the fighter came within his range, you're clinching. You're clinching. You get off one or two shots. Don't worry about throwing combination punches. Don't worry about trading with people. Once they get in, use your size, get cagey, and just hold. And Klitschko did it for a decade, and he did it successfully without losing many rounds. So that's one instance in where it worked. The trainer change worked. Another one is I can think of is Miguel Cotto, my guy, going over to Freddie Roach. Miguel Cotto was a guy who was with Evangelista Cotto for a while, and towards the end of their run, Evangelista wasn't even training him. He was just kind of there. And then Cotto changed trainers. He went with the Cuban amateur trainer. Then he switched again, and then he went with Freddie Roach before the Martinez fight, if I'm not mistaken. And he became a more offensive-minded fighter, went back to the body, and that trainer change worked as well. So there are instances in which a guy who is older, a guy who is well into his career, making a trainer change, and the chemistry just works. It just works. And that fighter can make the proper changes and be more successful. I just think that for the most part, though, I would venture to guess there's a higher percentage of it not making much of a difference. The fighter is who he is, and like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a game plan until they get hit. And once they get hit, they revert back to who they've been the 25 fights before. It's tough to make that change in a 3-4 month period of being with the guy. So I don't know. I tend to think that Usyk is going to beat Joshua no matter who Joshua has in his trainer. That's just how I feel. AJ tried to box Usyk. There's a game plan. He needs to use his size, strength, and power. That's right. But Usyk is slippery. He's a slippery fighter. So easier said than done, but I would agree. He's got to use his size. He's got to try to sell out and land big shots. And maybe that's what the move to Robert Garcia is going to do. Be more aggressive. Try to walk the Usyk shots. The thing that's troubling about that, though, and I would warn you, is if he's going to sit on his punches more, if you're going to throw more power shots, you're leaving yourself more open naturally. Usyk is a master at countering those shots, and it doesn't take much to get to Joshua's chin. I saw Joshua hurt against Usyk. So if Joshua is more aggressive in this fight, does Usyk stop him? That's the thing we got to ask ourselves too. Usyk has some sneaky power. Robert Garcia helped Maidana out a lot. He did. Shout out to Robert if he gets the W with AJ. That's huge for a stable brand and Latino community with having an adoptive son in AJ. And yeah, and as to somebody's point in the chat, is it does bring over a crossover appeal as well. It does. He's already huge across the pond. So American trainer with a nice built-in fan base, that ain't gonna hurt. That ain't gonna hurt. And I don't think the change certainly isn't gonna hurt. It's certainly gonna. I can't envision a scenario in which it hurts. Like I said, he could get knocked out against Usyk if he's more aggressive, right? If he opens up more, if he sits on his punches more, which I'm assuming the move is about, right? He wants to be a more aggressive fighter who has that dog in him, but it could backfire on him. But it also gives him the best opportunity in beating Usyk because he's not going to outbox Usyk. He's not winning 7 rounds against Usyk. He's just not. So if that's the game plan, but I don't think it will be. So it's certainly not going to hurt this trainer change. I've just seen this so many times where a guy just changes his trainer like he changes, like a woman changes her eyeshadow or whatever. Like it just they do it for a couple of weeks and they want to try something else. Boxers do this after losses sometimes, and I've just come accustomed to think. My theory is guys who are who they are at the end of the day. And I think once Joshua gets hit against Usyk again, he's going to revert back to whoever he was. When Cotto fought Rodriguez, that was his first fight with Roach. He fought Martinez in the next fight. And there you go. And the Cotto Roach thing worked. It worked. Roach brought him back to his roots. Aggressive style front foot, not so much going on the back foot, lateral movement, but front foot, and go to the body. Dig to the body, which is what Cotto was coming up. One of the reasons I loved Cotto coming up was the body work. AJ going to get caught a whole lot more with Robert Garcia. And that's what I'm thinking too, boxing historian. I'm thinking the move is to, and he said this when he went shopping for American trainers. He said the move is to go shop for American trainers in order to bring out a dog in me that I had before and that I lost. And here's an interesting stat that I just remembered I saw earlier is Joshua has become a more tentative fighter the past couple of years. 70% of his total punches thrown are jabs. That stat tells you he's a more tentative fighter. So I think Joshua says, I want to go back to who I was more so earlier in my career, where I'm sitting on my punches more. I'm throwing a wide array of shots. I'm trying to get guys out of there. And I want to bring that dog out of me. And I think Robert Garcia is going to try to bring that dog out of him, get him in there with some tough sparring, get him in there some old school tough sparring to where his chin is being tested. He's being more aggressive with his sparring, more offensive minded. But I just warn people, he's going to give up his height against Usyk. I don't think he's going to fight a style where he just, like I was just talking about with Emmanuel Stewart Klitschko, where he stays on the outside and just works the jab, because he's already been doing that. 70% of his total punches are jabs. So he's been trying to use his height. He hasn't been very effective with it against punchers. I just think his Achilles heel will always be there, much like with Amir Khan, is these guys can box. These guys can do a lot of things in the ring. They're versatile, but the chin, once it's touched, everything blows up. Everything goes out the window. And I think that's what we got here with Joshua is be careful what you wish for, asking for the dog to come out, because the dog could be put to sleep. Hate to say that. But if he sits on his punches more, becomes more aggressive, he can be put to sleep by Usyk. I'm telling you, Usyk does have that ability to put Joshua to sleep. I saw him hurt Joshua a couple times in that first fight. How much is the conflict in Ukraine going to affect Usyk mentally? Could inspire him or could mess him up. Yeah, that's the thing too. You never know. You just never know. It could be a detriment. It could be. It could give him a lot of motivation. I just think that Usyk's the type of guy that's going to show up. He always does. He has that track record. I think he's going to show up. Usyk will have the most of the crowd behind him because of the conflict. And this fight's in Saudi Arabia, and they're pushing it back to August, by the way. So it gives both fighters a month to prepare. So you would say that favors Joshua. He's going to have an extra month to work with Robert Garcia. However, Usyk did come in looking drained into this camp, so it'll give him an extra month as well. So I think the extra month will work for both fighters, but it's going to be in August in Saudi Arabia. I was a huge Cotto fan too, but I almost cried when he beat Martinez. Sergio is one of my all-time favorite fighters, and that was one of my favorite fights to watch when Cotto became the lineal middleweight champion against Sergio Martinez, which I was not expecting. I thought he was going to lose that fight. AJ has fought timidly since being KO'd by Ruiz. Yeah, Cotto beat a crippled fighter. That fight was Bull and Canelo beating Cotto at 160 for that belt was bigger bull. Yeah, I can't complain with that. But Fulton versus Roman. Look for a decision type fight, close on the cards. Um, activity versus a high output fighter versus a high percentage landed fighter in Fulton. I think Fulton will keep pace with Roman enough. And I think we're going to have ourselves a close fight on the scorecards. But I ultimately favor Fulton because I think he's on the collision course with Akhmadaliev. So on that note, man, I appreciate y'all tuning in as always. And go over to Twitter and give me a follow if you're not following me there. And hit that sub button if you're not subbed to me here. And I'll see y'all tomorrow around the same time. God bless.